I think most important for me is having that insight for everyone. It's like a sharing platform for everyone to understand what's happening in the current design world. What are people doing? What's like the coolest thing?
Hello, everybody. Here is Mario. Welcome to another episode of Design Interviews and Questions, where we interview designers from all around the world. Today's guest is Yah-Leng. So, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I always remember to all the interviewees that you're totally free to answer whatever you want. So, just feel free to answer as you wish.
Okay.
I would start then with the starting question, which is what made you become a designer?
I guess from a young age, teenage times, I was already sort of dabbling with creative stuff, designing the class T-shirts, working on stage designs for the school plays, etc. So, or the publications, or redesigning the school band's logo. So that's kind of where I had my sort of quick sort of clue where I'm going to be heading as a career, maybe. Yeah. But it wasn't until when I was much older that I was totally sure that this was something that I was gonna go for, because the education that I have here in Singapore is kind of very conventional, and we were doing like either you're gonna become a engineer, or you're gonna become a banker, or an accountant, or a lawyer. So it's a very sort of Asian sort of mentality towards getting your ambition, fulfilling your ambition, which is not our ambition, but maybe our parents' ambition. So it was until a later age, when I was a bit more mature, maybe, and I was already in the university doing computer engineering, that I really thought that sucked, and that was not something that I was going to do for the rest of my life. That I decided that I need to get out, and that was the point where I decided to plan my way to a design education. Yeah.
And then you founded Policy Design, Foreign Policy Design, the studio.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I mean, it's the name of the studio is really strong and has a double meaning. It is related to your vision of what is designed for you.
Yes, and yeah, I think the name was kind of an accident and coincidence. We were trying to find a name when we first started, and it was nerve-wracking, and it was because we were like, oh shit, sorry. We were trying so hard, racking our brains to come up with the best names, and we couldn't for the longest time. So one day I took a nap. I woke up and that name came to my mind, foreign policy. Maybe I was reading a lot on news or something, I don't know. But that totally made sense to me and my partner Arthur, because we were just back from New York. And during my time in New York, the places that I worked in, everyone was from different countries. They were not necessarily all Americans, but Europeans. They're from Russian. They were from the Eastern Europe. They were from Asia, everywhere, and that was a really good experience for me, because everyone had their different cultural difference. They have different viewpoints, perspective, and different approach on tackling a design problem. And also, what's interesting is design ideas are really interesting when it comes from all these different backgrounds and viewpoints. And I wanted that to be something that I would never like remove from my practice if I start a practice. So that's really, I guess that really resonates with the name Foreign Policy, and then decided to just go for it, because it seems like a winner name. And also, I think also a reminder for us to always think about making sure our design and our works and our thinking is always not so narrow, as in we always need to make sure that we are always looking out in a global sense, because the world is getting smaller, so we shouldn't be living under the well or something. So I think that's a good reminder as well, foreign policy.
Your works, as you said, are really interesting because they are not always the same. They're always different every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, they were very meaningful regarding the client and the connection with the graphics and so on. But what do you create as a designer? What do you think the role of the designer have to create behind the surface of the identity or the packaging?
That's a really great question. I think for us, I think it's beyond making beautiful things. I mean, that's a given. That's our job. That's what we're trained to do, and we have to make sure it's done. But beyond that, I feel that whatever we design has to make sense to the business. It has to resonate, strike a chord with their clientele, their audience, and if it doesn't, then it totally fails, because design is a form of communication, and if we cannot communicate through the design, then it totally fails. So in our way of doing design, we want to make sure that there's a whole lot of sort of story and essence to it, such that it tells a very strong, consistent stories in every touch point. Especially we do a lot of brand projects, so every touch point has to be cohesive. Everything the client or the audience of the client is in touch with has to feel and feel for the brand, and it's always consistent. The message that's coming through is consistent. I think that's what we're always trying to achieve. And what's even better if we could give them that element of surprise and an element of happiness, and that's even better if we can do that. Yeah.
And how does it work? Well, the design process. Because I don't know. Do you try to reach this meaning behind the graphic project, or is something that comes naturally when you're designing?
I think that takes a lot of discovery. We call it a discovery session. Definitely we sit down with the clients, and we don't call them clients, we call them project partners, because we believe in creating a project together, and it's not just a client and designer kind of relationship, but everyone is on the same footing, and we're all trying to create the best form of communication or design for that matter. And so our project partner is very much involved in making sure that they are relaying what's in their brain and what they feel and what the problem is to us, so that we can totally sort of get their point of view. We try to be in their shoe, and as a designer, we are always learning about the project. Every project comes through the door, and it's always different every time. It's a new industry, it's a new subject matter, it's a new sort of a new lifestyle that we've probably never embraced, and we need to learn about it. So it's also for us to be really diligent and hardworking in making sure that when we do our research, we don't leave any stone unturned. So um, we have a research team here, and designers also do as well research, and we all make sure that we cover everything. And there's always a point of view that we like to present to the project partner and how we feel about how we should take this project forward. And that's very much also why they come to us for trying to solve that problem for them. Yeah.
And do you think perfection in a project exists? Like it happened that once you said, okay, this project, it's really perfect. We did perfectly.
I would say not really. I would love to say that every project is perfect, but I have to say none of the projects are perfect. I mean, there are many circumstances and challenges that sometimes we have to be dealing with, and there's no perfect circumstance, and sometimes we have to sort of, I wouldn't want to say the word compromise, but sometimes there's some things that is out of our control, and we'll do our very best to make the very best out of what we can do to produce the best kind of work for our client, our project partners. Yeah, that's probably what I would say I would do. Yeah.
And what do you think instead regarding the contemporary design? We are living now in a very particular generation now with a lot of social media, a lot of influences. There's no more like Swiss style or Dutch design, you know, it's really global.
Mm.
So it's something that you like somehow, or is something that you don't like, that means that you rather to have different styles and not just one global?
That's a really interesting question. Not thought about it, but um, I think it's inevitable that styles evolve. You know, if you look at art history, through the Renaissance to, through post up to Impressionism, post-Impressionism, blah blah blah, till today. There's a lot of movement in between, and I think design is probably the same way. And it's really interesting right now because of the internet and social media. It's bringing everything so quickly to us, information so quickly readily to us, and so easy, to find out what other designers are doing. An Asian designer can quickly see what an European designer is doing, and be super inspired, and then somehow there is some form of element that is found, and that cross-pollination process, it's inevitable, and the influence is inevitable, and we're just moving towards this very interesting times where, like you said, there is maybe not going to be a definite style. Maybe, I'm not sure, but what I can see now is that it's very hard to tell sometimes the work is whether it's from Europe or it's from Asia. Like an Asian studio could also produce the same kind of style as a European studio. You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of interesting, I feel. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I feel that deep down in certain culture, the sense of culture, the sense of the background is still, history is still quite there. Like maybe like China, Japan, or even Korea, where they are a monolinguistic countries where they predominantly still use their language, and that influence like typography, right? And that's not anything that could take away from them. You know what I mean? maybe there is Western influence in terms of layout and color usage and the style, but then eventually they're still gonna own that style because it's their language, it's their culture, it's their writing system. So I feel that even though it's converging, but then there is still an interesting birth of these new styles, I feel. Yeah.
Today, one of the reason why design changed, especially for the styles and so on, and this global style is because of the impact of internet that had on the design, of course. And for you are always like really present on Instagram, for example, as a studio. And do you think it is a fundamental part today for a design studio to use these kind of tools like Instagram, social media, and not just the website?
Yes, I think it's actually crucial to do it because it's not about showing off your work, but I think it's also a form of exchange to the rest of the design community. I think people are always curious, especially across the world, right? Like I'm curious about what maybe the Italian designers are doing, and maybe you might be interested in what the Korean designers are doing. But if there's no such a platform, not such a platform, it might be difficult, And I think it's really helpful because it helps you to promote your work. I mean that's important too for business, but I think most important for me is having that insight for everyone. It's like a sharing platform for everyone to understand what's happening in the current design world. What are people doing? What's like the coolest thing, maybe in Japan or something. I think that's really important for designers to be on. I feel it's important. The conversation, the exchange, the cross-pollination is totally something that I embrace and I would think is important.
You have interns in your
Yes.
studio, right? And you see so many young designers coming to your studio and then leaving, and then others are coming. What do you see any difference about design education since the previous generation, for example? So you see difference day by day, time by time?
Yeah. I guess for the younger generation, because they are so reliant on the social media, uh, I feel that maybe there's a lack of the real sort of interest in maybe not for all, but just for my own observation, there's a reduce in interest in, say, just going through the history books and flipping through what graphic design history is about. I think more important for them is what's current, and they just want to know what the current design studios are doing. So that's something quite interesting for me. Then I think for me, for the young designers, they're just very sort of I won't say addicted, but they rely on social media for their inspirations, and so that also answers the previous questions about the importance of putting out your work through social media, because that could influence the next generation of designers. Yeah. As
Are you also? Yeah, sorry,
Okay,
please.
so
No,
I
please.
also noticed that they are a bit more well aware of who are the design studios, maybe the good ones, not just within the country, but beyond the country. So I've got a lot of interns from overseas, and they know us through social media, I saw that that stuff. So I think, and even one of my intern was really interesting. He has done like 3 or 4 internships and before, and I mean and all his in the studios that he interned at are actually quite curated by him. I find that quite interesting as well because he obviously did his research going online, looking at the studio's internet, the website, as well as the social media platforms, and picking out like, oh, I want to start with a small studio. I want to work with a bigger agency next. I want to work in Asia next. I want to go back to maybe Europe or something. So it's all very interesting. So right now they have that tool. They are more sophisticated in that way because back in our days, we don't have internet. I guess we heavily relied on like books. We buy a lot of magazines, design books. I think that's about it, really very different.
Are you a
Oh,
book
yeah.
collector? As almost all the graphic designers?
Yes, definitely. We hoard books. Yeah, I think my partner's gonna burn my books. No, just kidding. But yeah, I'm running out of shelves, so it's a thing. I think it's with all designers.
The role of the designer somehow is changing because I have the impression that previously it was more like just doing design, and today also speaking with the interviewees, I realized that graphic designer are also creator of content more often. And do you think the future, the role of the designer in the future is going in this direction to become a more independent person?
I think about content creation is a really interesting thought. I didn't think about it until you mentioned. I think it's quite true to some degree because in order to make sense of a piece of design work, there needs to be content. So sometimes the client might not have given you enough content to play with, and then it's always on us to say, hey, maybe you can do this, and maybe you can do this, and we ended up being the one proposing what to do for the content, and sometimes it's just very natural that we take that initiative to do that. So I think that's a natural shift towards adding content creation as part of the work scope. Maybe I think it's trending towards that in my experience. Yeah.
Now we arrive to the last question. We are facing difficult moment regarding this virus. But do you think there is some ways for the designers to help in this situation? Do you think in a moment of crisis the role of the designer can help the society?
I think for sure in a very small part, it might be small things that you might not think about. Like I know of a graphic designer in Thailand right now. He's helping to make some masks. It might seem like a small thing, but he's doing it. And then I've got a few initiatives. Actually, before we make a call, someone just called me and asked me if we could chip in to help them with their initiative to collect some food supplies and giving them out to the people who need them. So they needed to talk to the big corporation, so they needed like a decent looking sort of branding and a deck and maybe like a e-commerce site skinning. So these are little things that we could help. And then there are also things like maybe instructions that maybe like you need to instruct the people on how to put on the mask properly, or how to use certain thing, or so follow certain rules. I think these are also graphic design related, and we could play a part if graphic design can help communication be clearer. This is the time to use it. This is a very powerful tool, because without clear communication, especially at times like this, then maybe things might not go so well, and things might go wrong, or people might not follow the right instruction or things like that. And so I think design could play an important part on this for sure.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
For being. So take care, and
thanks for having
again.
me. Stay safe. wash your hands and stay healthy.